Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching Newsnight on DD India, your prime-time destination for news and bespoke analysis. It's good to have you again with us. All right, on the show tonight, Prime Minister Narendra Modi issues a stern warning to extremists, urges the world to unite against terrorism. He was speaking at the 145th birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Also on the show, France is in mourning after the knife attack that left 3 dead in Nice on Thursday. A third person has since been taken into custody in connection with the attack. And Sean Connery is no more. We'll bring you a retrospective on the life and times of the Scottish actor who essayed the role of James Bond. Plus, news and updates from around the world. All that and much, much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. Prime Minister Narendra Modi pays floral tributes at the Statue of Unity on the occasion of National Unity Day, takes part in the Ekta Divas parade, says solidarity shown by 130 crore Indians towards the COVID-19 warriors is a perfect tribute to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, says India is continuously strengthening its borders and that the country is fully ready to protect its sovereignty. Prime Minister Modi expresses concern over how some people have come out in support of terrorism, points out that no one can ever benefit from terrorism or violence, calls on the world to unite against the growing threat of terrorism. Prime Minister Modi hits out at the opposition for indulging in politics after the Pulwama terror attack, says when the entire nation was saddened by the loss of its brave sons, some parties were busy displaying their utter selfishness and arrogance, asserts that recent statements made in the neighbouring country's parliament have brought out the truth. The Prime Minister interacts with civil services officer trainees at Mussoorie through video conference from Kevadia, says serving the citizens is the highest duty of a civil servant, urges young officers to take decisions in the national interest and strengthen unity and integrity of the country, inaugurates water aerodrome and seaplane service. President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu and Union Home Minister Amit Shah all pay tributes to Iron Man Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel on his birth anniversary. The Home Minister administers Pledge of Unity to compatriots. Campaigning gears up for the remaining 2 phases of Bihar election. Political parties leave no stone unturned to woo voters. 94 constituencies spread over 17 districts to go to the polls on 3rd November in the 2nd phase. India continues to achieve significant success in its fight against COVID-19. Active cases fall below 6 lakh for the 2nd consecutive day. Recovery rate goes past 91%. Cases rise in West Bengal, Delhi and Kerala. Restrictions extended on Section 144 in 12 districts of Kerala till 15th November. And Scottish actor Sean Connery, who played the role of James Bond in over 7 spy thrillers, dies at the age of 90. Connery was the first actor to portray the role of British Secret Service agent Bond, which fetched him numerous awards, including an Oscar, 2 BAFTAs and 3 Golden Globes. All right, first up, a glimpse of the tribute to Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel.
सरदार वल्लभ भाई पटेल की जन्म जयंती की बहुत बहुत शुभकामनाएं।
सबसे ऊंचा, सबसे शानदार लौह पुरुष है हमारा सरदार।
सरदार पटेल ने हिंदुस्तान को वर्तमान स्वरूप दिया। यह देश मां भारती के महान सपूत को, देश के लौह पुरुष को श्रद्धा सुमन समर्पित कर रहा है।
भारत माता की
All right, let me dive straight into our cover story. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Saturday participated in Unity Day celebrations that commemorate the birth anniversary of Iron Man Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Now, on day 2 of his visit to Kevadia in Gujarat, the PM administered a pledge and witnessed the parade. He lauded the valor of the Pulwama martyrs as well. He expressed concern over negative politics seen after the 2019 surgical strike. The PM asserted that 130 crore Indians working towards building a new India that is secure and self-reliant.
सीमाओं पर भी भारत की नजर और नजरिया अब बदल गए हैं।
This is the self-confidence of the new India, a resolve to meet every challenge that makes the enemy kneel. And the main source of inspiration behind this new India is Iron Man Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. On the 145th birth anniversary of Sardar Patel, standing under the Statue of Unity, Prime Minister Narendra Modi pledged to make an India of Patel's dreams. Referring to the Pulwama attack, he recalled the pain that the nation endured. He hit out at the opportunistic politics that was played over national security.
पिछले दिनों पड़ोसी देश से जो खबरें आई है, जिस प्रकार वहां की संसद में सत्य स्वीकारा गया है, उसने इन लोगों के असली चेहरों को देश के सामने ला दिया है। अपने निहित स्वार्थ के लिए, राजनीतिक स्वार्थ के लिए ये लोग किस हद तक जा सकते हैं?
Be it the surgical strike or the air strike, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has proved that India has the might to defeat ill intentions of those from across the borders. But for PM Modi, the real concern is the negative politics over national security.
The Prime Minister described self-reliance as a prerequisite for a secure and developed nation.
आज का भारत सीमाओं पर सैकड़ों किलोमीटर लंबी सड़कें बना रहा है। अपनी संप्रभुता और सम्मान की रक्षा के लिए आज का भारत पूरी तरह सज्ज है, प्रतिबद्ध है, कटिबद्ध है।
Terming terrorism as the biggest curse for humanity, PM Modi said, India has borne the brunt of this inhumanity and has always given a befitting reply.
आज के माहौल में दुनिया के सभी देशों को, सभी सरकारों को, सभी पंथों को आतंकवाद के खिलाफ एकजुट होने की सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत है।
On the occasion of the birth anniversary of the Iron Man, who unified an India which was scattered among hundreds of princely states after independence, PM Modi said that Kashmir is now writing a new chapter in history through its progress.
आर्टिकल 370 हटने के बाद कश्मीर ने समावेश का 1 साल पूरा किया। 31 अक्टूबर को ही, आज से 1 साल पहले ये कार्यरत हुआ था। कश्मीर के विकास में जो बाधाएं आ रही थी, उन्हें पीछे छोड़कर अब कश्मीर विकास के नए मार्ग पर बढ़ चुका है।
Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is India's motto and diversity our strength. We are unbeatable if we are one. On the occasion of the birth anniversary of Sardar Patel, PM Modi called upon 130 crore countrymen to build a new India that is self-reliant, empowered, capable prosperous and equal with limitless possibilities. Bureau Report, DD India. All right, time now for our In Focus segment, in which we are discussing about the issue of the anniversary of Sardar Patel and Prime Minister Modi's stern message against terrorism. All right, joining me are two very special guests, TCA Raghavan and Sushant Sareen. Now, Ambassador Raghavan is a former Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan. He is currently the Director General of the Indian Council of World Affairs. Now, by an act of Parliament in the year 2001, the ICW has been declared as an institution of national importance. And Sushant Sareen is a Senior Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. It's a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. Gentlemen, welcome to News Night. If I can quickly start with you, Ambassador Raghavan. The Prime Minister's forceful intervention in Kevadia this morning on the issue of terrorism and extremism, and that too on the anniversary of Sardar Patel, a befitting occasion, don't you think, to live up to the ideals of the Iron Man?
The Prime Minister was quite right to underwrite and underscore the importance of building up a very strong international consensus against terrorism. We certainly have faced a large brunt of this threat in the past years, and from time to time our response has also been resolute and robust. But if you look at events elsewhere in the world, what is happening in Afghanistan or what is happening even more recently in France, what this brings out very clearly is, as the Prime Minister said, we need to strengthen both the national consensus as also the international consensus on all issues relating to terrorism, including, of course, the question of state-sponsored terrorism, with which the Prime Minister began his remarks.
Indeed. Sushant Sareen, coming to you now, as Ambassador Raghavan pointed out, there's a need for a national and global consensus as well on the issue of terrorism. Now, in that context, do you think it's time for some countries, some capitals of the world to come off the fence and call some countries and governments out for aiding and abetting terrorism and actually call their bluff on plain and simple terrorism? Sushant, if you can hear me?
Ramesh, I can't agree more. Yes, I
Sure, carry on.
agree. The problem, however, is that,
Sushant, bear with me. We'll fix that video link with you momentarily. I'll come back to you in just a bit. But if I can go back to my other guest, Ambassador Raghavan. Ambassador Raghavan, in the Prime Minister's remarks at Kevadia on the occasion of the birth anniversary of Sardar Patel, he referred to many issues confronting India, of which terrorism was one. Now, in a veiled reference to China in particular, he says India is fully ready and capable to guard our frontiers and give a befitting response to adversaries. He did not mention China by name, but the inference was there for all to draw. What did you make of the confidence and self-belief, so to speak, when he spoke about India being able to meet any eventuality going forward, especially in our neighborhood?
There is no doubt where any external threat is concerned, the country has always stood united and will stand united in the future also. Sardar Patel's anniversary is, of course, only a reminder of the fact that the country is at its strongest when it is united. But if I may return to the terrorism issue and the question which you had asked, Sushant, I think the point also is that the issue of terrorism in the past decade has also got deeply embroiled with the larger geopolitics which plays out. One of our very important initiatives, which is a UN comprehensive convention on terrorism,
that's still hanging fire, Ambassador.
Not gained the kind of traction which it should have because of this larger geopolitics, which is often reflected in, as you said, countries sitting on the fence.
Right. I'll ask our producers if we can go back to Sushant. Is Sushant there with us? I don't see him on the screen. We'll try to fix that link with Sushant. But staying with Ambassador Raghavan for now, Ambassador Raghavan, he referred to Pulwama attack as well. Remember, viewers might remember the attack in Pulwama, in which more than 40 CRPF personnel was. I'm told Sushant is back with us. Sushant, if you can hear me. Prime Minister Modi referred to the Pulwama attack that claimed the lives of Indian paramilitary personnel just over almost 2 years ago. Now, in that context, he says, referred to Pakistani minister's statement in Parliament saying Pakistan has exposed itself. Now, at the same time, he says no one can benefit from terrorism and violence. India has always fought against terrorism. Peace and unity are the only way out. We have to fight against each and every force that supports terror outfits. These are his words. What did you make of Prime Minister's forceful intervention on the issue of terrorism emanating from Pakistan in particular?
Ramesh, I hope my internet connection holds up this time. But let me combine both the first question which you had put to me as well as this.
Sure.
See, the time has been long past that all the countries need to come together to fight the scourge of terrorism. The problem, however, is that, there are other countries which keep hedging their bets. But even we, for example, even today, while the Prime Minister was very forthright in coming out against terrorism, why was he shari about naming and shaming Pakistan? He needed to do that. At a time, and clearly there were oblique references to Pakistan, and the way the Pakistanis and the Turks, for example, the Turks are past masters. They're even beating the Pakistanis as epicenters of terrorism. But the way the Pakistanis and the Turks have been, raving and ranting against France, literally you have another former Prime Minister from Malaysia literally threatening genocide. You have these kind of things coming up. And I don't see, these are not our friends. These countries are not our friends. And I don't see why the Prime Minister needs to hold back on his words or hold back on shaming these countries and naming these countries. I think we need to come out of, those constraints of diplomacy which we have put upon ourselves. Because by diplomacy alone and by not naming and shaming these guys, you're not going to get anything out of them. And I think because the Pakistanis and the garrulity of the Pakistani ministers is a gift that keeps giving, they actually expose themselves not only, when the former speaker said that their legs were quaking of the Pakistan army chief when, they thought that India is going to attack, or for that matter, the science and technology minister who openly admitted that and took great pride in, the fact that both the government as well as the military as well as the terrorists, which also means that there are no longer any non-state actors in Pakistan, when all of them combined together to carry out the most dastardly terror attack in Pulwama last year. And I think we need to use these opportunities which come, these full tosses which the Pakistanis bowl to us, and we should knock it out of the stadium. And I really believe that, the Prime Minister should be even more forthright in naming these countries and trying to tie together an international consensus against these terror-sponsoring states. I don't see any reason. We have suffered enough. We've been suffering for almost 40 years now. And I don't see any reason why we need to hold back anymore.
Sushant, Ambassador Raghavan referred to the CCIT, which is hanging fire for the last more than 2 decades now. At the same time, he also referred to domestic consensus. Now, we see a phenomenon in India where political parties, especially the opposition, ask for evidence every time India strikes back or impose costs on the perpetrators of terrorism. Do you think it's time for all political parties to take a non-partisan position on the issue of terrorism, at least call a moratorium on not asking for evidence every time India strikes back?
Yeah, but that would be an ideal situation. But I suppose, some amount of politicking would happen in a very competitive kind of politics that we have in this country. I only wish that the politicking which happens on issues of national security, of issues of national importance like terrorism, and which is affecting us, which is bleeding us in many ways. I would really wish the politics was to talk about how the government needs to do more, where the government might be failing, rather than the kind of petty politicking which normally happens, asking for evidence. No country gives these kind of evidences anymore. And clearly, that's the kind of silliness which, silly season which descends on the politics of this country every time this kind of an incident happens. So that is one part of it. The other part of it is what Ambassador Raghavan spoke about, the CCIT. Now, again, it's a very good idea. We need to keep pushing for it. But I think even when that continues to hang fire, I think we need to start building up, call it a coalition of the willing, call it what you will, but a kind of consensus among countries like France, like India, like the US, for example. Many other countries need to have much closer interaction with them, much closer arrangements with them to fight against terrorism. And I think we need to move forward on that rather than just keep lamenting about, why has the CCIT been accepted. Countries like China, some of the other countries will probably continue to obstruct it because their client states like Pakistan are going to be affected by it. So I think maybe that is not the way to go forward. If that happens, well and good. But while that is not happening, I don't think we should be dissuaded from trying up this kind of a coalition with other countries.
Ambassador Raghavan, a quick point on the CCIT now. It's been hanging fire, as I said, for decades on end. Now, we saw what happened in France. We saw what happened in Pulwama. We saw what happened in Mumbai in 26/11 attack. And yet, 2 decades and more later, we are still here quibbling over semantics. What is terrorism? Who is a terrorist? Is it time for us to at least, as Sushant says, build a coalition of the willing to get this thing moving on the ground so that, we can prevent such attacks going forward as well? Lives are at stake here.
I'm sorry, is that for me?
Yes, to you.
Well, yes, I think a coalition of those who and who are willing is very important, and such a coalition possibly already exists. But the whole idea of a UN convention is that it gather as large as possible of an international consensus. That is where the role of diplomacy comes in, and that to some extent has been where the disappointment has arisen, because a number of countries have seen this issue from a narrow perspective and from a narrow point of view. The fact is that countries act according to their own interests, and however strongly we feel about it because of our own national interests being so greatly threatened by this scourge, there are others who will always have a different perspective. So how to bring about the largest possible consensus so that the doubters and the naysayers are left with no option but to go along, that really is the diplomatic challenge. I don't think in many such cases, the option of going it alone really is the most effective option. The challenge is to bring about as large a consensus as is possible, so that everyone else then has no other option but to go along. And in diplomacy, these things often happen. In the United Nations, for instance, China, many other countries in the beginning had held out on the listing of certain very well-established and well-known terrorists, where the evidence against them was overwhelming. But in the end, they had to give in and join the consensus because the pressures on them were too much to resist. So I think we should try to work towards building up those kind of pressures rather than looking for an easy opt-out of going it alone.
Indeed, I would have loved to continue this conversation, but I've run out of time. I have to stop here. And I want to thank both my guests, Ambassador Raghavan and Sushant Sareen, for making time to be with us on Newsnight. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right, and staying with the story we are discussing on Newsnight, on the occasion of the 145th birth anniversary of Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Prime Minister Modi on Saturday took the salute of the parade at a ceremony held at Kevadia in Gujarat. The event signified the message of an undivided India. The parade saw drills and performances by Indian paramilitary forces such as the CRPF, CISF, the police and the NDRF, including a CRPF women battalion. Now, 31st October is celebrated as National Unity Day.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi led the nation on Rashtriya Ekta Divas, administered the Unity Pledge.
और सुरक्षा को बनाए रखने के लिए स्वयं को समर्पित करूंगा।
On display was the glory of valor of our police and central armed forces, encapsulating the spirit of a united India. Prime Minister Narendra Modi took the salute at the Ekta Divas parade.
तुम विविध रूप धरने वाली
CRPF's women commandos were the highlight of the parade, showcasing women power that protects and nurtures India. CRPF's 6th Battalion is the first women battalion from India to be part of the UN peacekeeping forces. These brave ambassadors of the country displayed their coordinated precision.
सरदार पटेल की दृढ़ इच्छा शक्ति व दूरदर्शिता से प्रेरित
53 flag bearers, some of whom have been decorated with the president's colors, also participated in the parade.
संक्षिप्त प्रस्तुति के साथ उपस्थित हैं। CISF केंद्रीय सशस्त्र बल के रूप में स्वयं
CRPF's battalions protecting our borders, be it from snowy peaks of Jammu and Kashmir to the deserts of Rajasthan, also showcase their valor.
चोटियां, राजस्थान के रेगिस्तान, विशेष आकर्षण का केंद्र रहने वाला सीमा सुरक्षा बल का
A contingent of camel-mounted soldiers of the Indian Border Security Force won the hearts of those present at the Ekta parade ceremony with their regal display.
बल के रण बांकुरे
Color and music at the cultural extravaganza beautifully captured the spirit of unity in diversity.
कुछ ही क्षणों में यहाँ पर इस आसमान में होंगे। ये जैगवार लड़ाकू विमान है जो स्ट्राइकर प्लेन्स हैं। स्टैच्यू की ओर देख सकते हैं, ये जैगवार फाइटर एयरक्राफ्ट।
Echoes of Bharat Mata Ki Jai are perhaps the best tribute to Iron Man Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel on his 145th birth anniversary.
At the Ekta Divas parade, CRPF's women warriors epitomized Nari Shakti that protects unity of the nation at all costs. On display was the valor of police and paramilitary forces from across the nation. Saluting the first Deputy Prime Minister and Home Minister of India, Sardar Patel, Prime Minister's message at the Ekta Divas parade was clear. United we stand, divided we fall.
Sudhakar Das for DD India, Kevadia, Gujarat.
Now, on the occasion of National Unity Day, Prime Minister Modi on Saturday launched India's maiden seaplane service between Sabarmati riverfront in Ahmedabad and the Statue of Unity at Kevadia. If you're wondering what a seaplane is typically a fixed-wing aircraft with a few seats. It can take off from and land on water. More in the next report.
सरदार सरोवर से साबरमती रिवर फ्रंट तक सरदार साहब के दर्शन के लिए स्टैच्यू ऑफ यूनिटी को देखने के लिए देशवासियों को अब सी प्लेन सर्विस का भी विकल्प मिलेगा।
A new milestone in the path of transforming India, a flight towards an empowered India. Prime Minister Modi added a new chapter in the history of aviation and tourism in India as he launched the country's first seaplane service between the Statue of Unity to the Sabarmati riverfront in Ahmedabad.
ये देश की पहली और अपने आप में अनूठी सी प्लेन सेवा है। सरदार साहब के दर्शन के लिए, स्टैच्यू ऑफ यूनिटी को देखने के लिए देशवासियों को अब सी प्लेन सर्विस का भी विकल्प मिलेगा।
The PM took a ride from Kevadia to Ahmedabad on the seaplane service. He also inaugurated the water aerodrome at the Sabarmati riverfront and the seaplane service from Sabarmati riverfront to Kevadia. The PM greeted the people looking on. Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Singh Puri called it a historic step for the government towards New India.
Today is truly a historic day, not only because it's 31st October, but because ये जो connectivity seaplane का decision है, it's a very thing. कुछ ही जल्द समय में और भी connectivity होगी और Kevadia will develop into one of the world's top tourist spots.
Civil Aviation Secretary Pradeep Singh Kharola said seaplane services offer a lot of potential in terms of tourism and development.
उड़ान स्कीम के कई पहलू हैं। पहला पहलू वो था कि दुर्गम जो हमारे जितने स्थल हैं वहाँ पे कनेक्टिविटी दी जाए। एक और पहलू है कि टूरिज्म को प्रमोट किया जाए और टूरिज्म प्रमोट करने के लिए ये जो सी प्लेन सर्विस आज प्रारंभ हुई है, इससे बहुत ज़्यादा हमारा जो देश में जो पोटेंशियल है वो पूरा खुल जाता है।
Seaplanes have the ability to land and take off from water, thus offering access to areas that do not have landing strips or runways.
शुरुआत में हम 2 या 3 फ्लाइट दिन की करेंगे। जैसे जैसे डिमांड बढ़ेगी, जैसे जैसे रिक्वायरमेंट होगी, हम इसको बढ़ाएंगे। अभी हमारी योजना ये है कि 4 बार ये कम से कम फ्लाइट अहमदाबाद से साबरमती से यहाँ पर आए और यहाँ से वापस साबरमती जाए।
Earlier, during the campaign for the 2017 Gujarat Assembly elections, Prime Minister Modi was seen travelling on the seaplane. The PM then travelled on the seaplane from Sabarmati River to Dharoi Dam.
These waters of Narmada have been witness to history in the making. But let me tell you that Kevadia is only a stepping stone. There are many more destinations lined up for you. Vishal Baristo, DD News, Kevadia.
And Prime Minister Modi interacted with officer trainees of the Indian Civil Services at the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie, through video conference from Kevadia in Gujarat. This was a part of the integrated foundation course called Arambh, launched in 2019. The PM urged the probationers to follow Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel's philosophy that serving the citizens of the country is the highest duty of a civil servant. He urged young officers to take decisions in the national interest and strengthen the unity and integrity of the country. He stressed that the decisions taken by civil servants should always be in the interest of the Indian citizens, notwithstanding the scope of the department or the region in which they work. Here are the big takeaways from the PM's address.
स्टील फ्रेम का काम देश को ये एहसास दिलाना भी होता है कि बड़े से बड़ा संकट हो या फिर बड़े से बड़े बदलाव, आप एक ताकत बनकर देश को आगे बढ़ाने में अपना दायित्व निभाएंगे। सरकार शीर्ष से नहीं चलती है। नीतियां जिस जनता के लिए हैं, उनका समावेश बहुत जरूरी है। जनता केवल सरकार की नीतियों की, प्रोग्राम्स की रिसीवर नहीं है। जनता जनार्दन ही असली ड्राइविंग फोर्स है। इसलिए हमें गवर्नमेंट से गवर्नेंस की तरफ बढ़ने की जरूरत है। देश में नए परिवर्तन के लिए, नए लक्ष्यों की प्राप्ति के लिए नए मार्ग और नए तौर तरीके अपनाने के लिए बहुत बड़ी भूमिका ट्रेनिंग की होती है। स्किल सेट के डेवलपमेंट की होती है। देश में ह्यूमन रिसोर्स की सही और आधुनिक ट्रेनिंग पर भी बहुत जोर दिया जा रहा है। आपने खुद भी देखा है कि कैसे बीते 2-3 वर्षों में ही सिविल सर्वेंट्स की ट्रेनिंग का स्वरूप बहुत बदल गया है। मिशन कर्मयोगी कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग की दिशा में अपनी तरह का एक नया प्रयोग है। आप सभी जिस बड़े और लंबे सफर पर निकल रहे हैं, उसमें रूल्स का बहुत योगदान है, लेकिन इसके साथ ही आपको रोल पर भी बहुत ज्यादा फोकस करना है। रूल एंड रोल, लगातार संघर्ष चलेगा, लगातार तनाव आएगा। रूल्स का अपना महत्व है, रोल की अपनी महत्वपूर्ण जिम्मेवारी है। इन दोनों का बैलेंस, यही तो आपके लिए टाइट रोप पर चलने वाला खेल है। सिविल सर्वेंट जो भी निर्णय ले, वो राष्ट्रीय संदर्भ में हो, देश की एकता अखंडता को मजबूत करने वाले हो, संविधान के स्पिरिट को बनाए रखने वाले हो। आपका क्षेत्र भले ही छोटा हो, आप जिस विभाग को संभाले उसका दायरा भले ही कम हो, लेकिन फैसलों में हमेशा देश का हित, लोगों का हित होना चाहिए। एक नेशनल पर्सपेक्टिव होना चाहिए।
The second phase of Bihar election will be held on 3rd November. Polling will be held on 94 constituencies across 17 districts on the day. Campaigning is on in full swing as top leaders such as Chief Minister Nitish Kumar and BJP President JP Nadda crisscross the state for rallies.
Campaigning for the assembly elections in Bihar continues at full steam as political parties are leaving no stone unturned to woo the voters. State Chief Minister Nitish Kumar was at his oratorial best in Bhagalpur, where he attacked the opposition.
लोग सिर्फ परिवार के बारे में सोचते हैं, पति पत्नी बेटा बेटी, और हमारे लिए पूरा बिहार एक परिवार है और हम पूरे बिहार को एक परिवार मान करके सबकी सेवा करने में लगे रहते हैं।
BJP President JP Nadda continues to hold the party's mantle in the state. Attacking the opponents on all issues, Nadda remembered to keep the development agenda at the forefront of the campaign.
पिछला चुनाव नीतीश कुमार ने लालू जी के साथ लड़ा था कि नहीं लड़ा? महागठबंधन बना था कि नहीं बना था? क्यों टूटा? इसलिए टूटा क्योंकि नीतीश जी समझ गए कि मेरा सुशासन इन कुशासन वालों के साथ नहीं चल सकता है।
Tejasvi Yadav, on the other hand, continues to be the crowd puller for the Grand Alliance, addressing a string of rallies in the state.
जो असल मुद्दे क्या है बिहार के? दवाई, पढ़ाई, कमाई, सिंचाई, ये जो है असल मुद्दे। क्या पढ़ाई, दवाई, कमाई, सिंचाई, नीतीश कुमार जी ने शिक्षा को पूरा चौपट कर दिया।
Birthday boy and LJP President Chirag Paswan visited the Patan Devi temple in Patna before starting the day's campaign. In a freak incident, Jan Adhikar Party's Pappu Yadav suffered minor injuries when the stage where he was addressing a rally collapsed. In the second phase, 94 constituencies will go to polls on 3rd of November. For the third and final phase, polling will be held on 7th of November in the remaining 78 constituencies. With input from Patna Bureau, Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Right, moving on, India achieved a significant success in its fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the case fatality rate has fallen below 1.5%. It's now at 1.49%. The deaths per million population is at a low of 88 deaths per million. Nearly 60,000 recoveries were recorded, taking the cumulative total of recovered patients to over 74.3 lakh. Now, with this, the recovery rate rises to 91.34%. Now, the central government's strategy of test, trace, track and treat has focused on effective containment strategy, aggressive testing and standardized clinical management protocols based on comprehensive standard of care approach, which includes use of anticoagulants and non-invasive oxygen. And Unity Day was celebrated in state capitals too. Here's a roundup of the celebrations. The birth anniversary of Iron Man Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was celebrated as Ekta Divas across the country. President Ramnath Kovind, Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister Amit Shah paid homage to the Iron Man on his 145th birth anniversary. Prime Minister Modi saluted Sardar Patel at the Statue of Unity in Kevadia, Gujarat. After paying obeisance, Home Minister Amit Shah administered the oath of national unity to the people present at the ceremony.
अपने देश की आंतरिक सुरक्षा सुनिश्चित करने के लिए अपना योगदान करने का भी सत्यनिष्ठा से मैं संकल्प करता हूं। वंदे मातरम।
Paying tribute, Amit Shah tweeted, Sardar Patel devoted every moment of his life for the integration of the country, reconstruction of the Somnath temple and awakening the spirit of one nation. On behalf of the grateful nation, I salute the great patriotic and Iron Man Sardar Patel. The birth anniversary of Sardar Patel was also celebrated in many parts of the country. Police organized a parade in Jammu and Kashmir. The governors of Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh also paid homage to Sardar Patel in their respective states. Union Minister of State for Home Affairs G. Kishan Reddy paid tribute to Sardar Patel in Andhra Pradesh. Police parade was also held in capitals of other states and programs were organized to celebrate the National Unity Day. Sardar Patel, a symbol of unity who united hundreds of princely states after independence, laid the foundation of today's India. His leadership, dedication and great contribution, India will never forget. News Night Desk, DD India. The French city of Nice is coping with the shock and grief of terror attack. This on a day when a third person was taken into custody in France in connection with the knife attack which left 3 dead in Nice on Thursday.
An opera tenor singing the French national anthem from his apartment window in Paris on Friday in memory of the Nice knife attack victims as France entered another lockdown.
The message to the French people and to the wider world is let's all of us stand united, because a people singing is a people standing upright. Singing means standing up straight and facing the enemy, be that a virus or terrorism.
In Nice, Notre Dame Church, the site of the knife terror attack that claimed 3 lives, remained cordoned off on Saturday, as mourners still left tributes at its steps for the victims. More is now being learnt about the 21-year-old Tunisian killer who apparently entered France through Italy from where he had been expelled after reaching there illegally on a boat. Ibrahim Issaoui apparently travelled unchecked in France, going first to Paris and then making his way to Nice just a day before the attack. He reportedly raised no red flags with authorities anywhere in Tunisia, Italy or France. He had only had small run-ins with the law as a teen, nothing indicative of his journey down a radicalized path. The Nice attacks took place just under 2 weeks after a middle school teacher in a Paris suburb was beheaded by an 18-year-old attacker who was apparently incensed by the teacher showing a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad in class. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
And now to your daily dose of US election 2020. Now, Trump and Biden pulled out all stops as they held campaign rallies in a last-ditch attempt to woo voters. Only 2 days remained for the much-anticipated face-off between the two leaders.
The COVID-19 pandemic, which has killed more than 229,000 people in the United States and cost millions more their jobs, continues to dominate the final days of the US presidential campaign. Democratic challenger Joe Biden on Friday sought support in Midwestern states where the coronavirus has roared back, with the US President Donald Trump falsely accusing doctors of profiting from COVID-19 deaths, while Biden said Trump had surrendered to the pandemic. A record surge of cases is pushing hospitals to the brink of capacity, while the news has pushed Wall Street to its worst week since March, severely undercutting one of Trump's main arguments for re-election.
Did you hear what he said today? He said today at a rally that our doctors are the problem because they're putting their lives on the line, busting their necks. He said they're making up deaths from COVID-19 because they get more money. They're making up deaths. People aren't really dying from COVID, they're dying for other things, but they're saying it's COVID to make the numbers go up. My Lord.
As he campaigned in the battleground state of Wisconsin on Friday, US President Donald Trump criticized polling numbers and said that the hidden Trump supporter will turn out and vote for him in greater numbers on November 3rd.
I don't know how the hell I can be tied with this guy. He's shot. He's shot. They said, sir, you're tied in Wisconsin. You know, normally that means because we have like a hidden voter. People that don't want to talk about it, they just go out and vote for Trump. I never knew. Should I be complimented by that?
Vice presidential hopeful Senator Kamala Harris was joined by former rivals in Texas on Friday as Democrats make a play in the Republican stronghold, while Vice President Mike Pence campaigned in Arizona, where the audience chanted "Lock her up" as Pence spoke about Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi.
And you know, part of the issue that I see, let's remember this. From the time the guy was running for office until now, Donald Trump has had this weird obsession with trying to get rid of whatever Barack Obama and Joe Biden created. Do we need presidents with weird obsessions? No. We're done with that, aren't we?
With President Donald Trump back in the White House for 4 more years, and with God's help, we're going to make America great again. Again. Thank you all very much. God bless you. God bless America. Now let's go get it done, Arizona.
Last-minute legal battles have added to the uncertainty. On Thursday, a federal appeals court said that Minnesota's plan to count ballots that arrive after Election Day was illegal. Joe Biden immediately urged supporters not to put any more ballots in the mail, but drop them off instead. Trump has repeatedly claimed, without evidence, that mail-in ballots are susceptible to fraud, and has more recently argued that only the results available on election night should count. Shops and businesses in Midtown Manhattan covered their windows with plywood on Friday in anticipation of unrest connected to the election day. Retailers have been on edge after raiders earlier this year smashed windows and set stores ablaze in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Portland, and other US cities. Voters head to the polls to choose a president in the United States on November 3rd. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Actor Sean Connery is no more. The actor who immortalized the character with his iconic suave style and deep throat voice died aged 90. Sean Connery is best remembered as James Bond, but his other roles also stood apart, one even fetching him the coveted Oscar.
Scottish movie legend Sean Connery, who shot to international stardom as the suave and sophisticated British agent James Bond and went on to grace the silver screen for 4 decades, has died aged 90. Born August 25, 1930, Sean Connery shot to international stardom as James Bond, but it was his later roles that won him acclaim for his acting. The Scottish actor was knighted by Queen Elizabeth in 2000, 2 years after he was reportedly denied the honour because of his ardent Scottish nationalism. Tall, distinguished, and with a throaty voice to match a sometimes crusty personality, Sean Connery played a series of character roles besides Bond and won an Academy Award in 1988 for his portrayal of a tough Chicago cop in The Untouchables. But for millions of film fans, he will always be remembered first as a British Agent 007, the character created by novelist Ian Fleming and immortalized by Sean Connery in film from the first in the franchise, Dr. No, in 1962. The Bond film's success made Sean Connery Britain's most popular film actor for 4 consecutive years, and he was the #1 box office attraction in American cinemas in 1966. He played the character of James Bond in 7 films. But Sean Connery was a different type from the suave, sophisticated Bond, with his impeccable social background and connoisseur's taste in wine and women. Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, and Never Say Never Again were his Bond's movies. In fact, he was lured back in 1971 to make Diamonds Are Forever, and 12 years later, at the age of 53, he acted in Never Say Never Again. Sean Connery had a prolific career outside Bond, starring in The Hill, The Man Who Would Be the King, Outland, The Name of the Rose, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, The Russia House, The Hunt for Red October, The Rock, and in 2000, at the age of 70, the critically acclaimed Finding Forrester. Newsnight Desk, DD India.
Right, moving on. Rescuers intensify the search for survivors underneath the rubble of damaged buildings in Izmir after a strong earthquake struck the agency. Officials said 25 people were killed in coastal areas in Turkey's west, while 2 teenagers, a boy and a girl, died on the Greek island of Samos after a wall collapsed on them. At least 20 buildings in Izmir were destroyed. Search and rescue operations were complete in 8 buildings, while operations continued at 9 locations. At least 804 people were injured in Turkey. The area had been hit by some 470 aftershocks. Flares lit up Warsaw city centre on Friday as tens of thousands of people from across Poland joined a march in a Polish capital, the biggest in 9 days of protests against a ruling by the country's top court last week. The court imposed a near-total ban on abortion in the predominantly Catholic nation. Military police lined the streets, some of them in riot gear, as the demonstration began. Organizers said some 1 lakh people gathered in the capital following a constitutional court ruling on 22nd October outlawing abortions due to fetal defects. And voting started in Ivory Coast as President Alassane Ouattara seeks a 3rd term in an election 2 rival candidates have urged their supporters to boycott. The recent violence has pitted the 78-year-old president's supporters against those of his opponents. His opponents say he is breaking the law by running again. The constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. Ouattara says he can run again under a new constitution approved in 2016 and is doing so only because his hand-picked successor died unexpectedly in July. At least 2 people were killed and 51 injured after a gas pipeline explosion in southern Iraq. The blast occurred on Friday night near the southern city of Samawa, 270 kilometers south of capital Baghdad. Firefighters managed to contain the fire after shutting down the gas line. Police said the pipeline extension passes near a camp for an Iraqi militia force near Samawa. Iraqi energy officials said the domestic line was transporting gas from some of the southern fields to feed power stations in southern cities and a key power station near Baghdad. Now, Greece will expand a nighttime curfew and shut restaurants and bars in the most populous areas of the country for 1 more month to contain a resurgence in COVID-19 cases. Greece has reported less cases of the coronavirus than most in Europe, but infections have spiked since early October. Restaurants, bars, cafes, museums, cinemas, theatres and gyms will be shut from 3rd November for 1 month across northern and central Greece and the Greater Athens region, some of which are already under a regional lockdown. Only retail businesses, industry, schools, hotels and hairdressing salons will remain open. The latest data from the Italian Ministry of Health on Friday showed the number of new confirmed COVID-19 cases in the country crossed the 31,000 mark in the past 24 hours. It was the highest since the epidemic outbreak, making the daily increase of over 30,000 for the first time. Now, there were 199 new deaths that day, bringing the total number of deaths to 38,321. A record surge of the coronavirus cases in the U.S. pushed hospitals closer to the brink of capacity. It drove the number of infections reported on Friday to an ominous new daily world record of 1 lakh, 4 days before the U.S. presidential election. The U.S. also documented its 9 millionth case to date on Friday, representing nearly 3% of the population. About 2.29 lakh people have died since the outbreak of the pandemic early this year. U.S. health authorities on Friday confirmed that more than 1 lakh people had tested positive for COVID-19 over the past 24 hours. Friday's tally set a new single-day record in U.S. cases for the first time in the past 10 days, surpassing the previous peak of 91,248 new infections posted a day earlier. And that's a wrap, but news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile and digital platforms. Don't forget, it's a simple task. Just wear a mask. Join DD India's Mask Up campaign to beat COVID-19. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.